Watch this. I've built over 100 n8n workflows, and these are the tips that I wish I knew when I first started. Early on, my flows were slow, messy, and hard to debug. If that's you right now, this video will save you hours. We'll move fast. First, speed and clarity, then logic and safety, then the pro tips that I use in every single one of my builds. I'll show you quick demos on screen so that you can follow along. All right, let's get into it. So when I first started building, what I wish I had known was that you can actually just execute one node at a time. So if you click on execute step, it's only going to execute that node. And the reason why I wish I knew that was because when I double click on the node, I can actually see the output that the node's giving. So then I can continue building the next node and debug if there's any issues. Another tip that I wish I had known was the ability to deactivate nodes. So for example, if I only want to test one branch of this workflow, I can simply go ahead and deactivate the node. When I click execute, it's no longer going to process the deactivated node. The second tip that I wish I had known was the ability to pin and edit data. So you can see here that there's a little pin which indicates that I've actually pinned some data for this test execution. Now the reason that this is helpful is because if I have different scenarios that I want to test in my workflow, I can test each scenario. So in this case here, when I execute it, we'll see it's going to go down the active users. But if I want to go ahead and change the mock data in here, I can simply change the status from active to inactive. And then I'll execute this step, and then I'll repin it again, and then now I can execute and test the other workflow. The next really helpful tip that I wish I had known when I first got started was the tidy up feature. So I don't know about you, but when I'm building workflows, I end up just putting nodes all over the page. But what you can actually do in n8n is highlight your selection, right click, and then click on the tidy up selection node. Instantly, your workflow becomes tidier, evenly spaced, and perfectly aligned. Another pro tip, as you're building your workflow, make sure to always tidy up your selection. The next tip that I wish I had known when I first got started was to avoid the if tower and then use the switch node instead. So you'll see here the old way, which is the if tower. You have multiple nested ifs. So every single if node is checking one criteria. So if the status is pending, if the status is approved, if the status declined. And so you can see in this example, we've actually gone down 3 if nodes. On the bottom though, the new way, which is your switch node. What's going to happen there is we'll just have one list of criteria that executes once against the order status versus 3 if nodes. In my sample data here, I've set the status to approved. Let's see what happens when I execute this workflow. So you'll see in the top branch, we've had 2 if checks. We've had, is the status pending? No. And then we continue on to our, is the status approved? Yes. And then we go down the true branch and we execute whatever action. But down the bottom, you'll see the new way, the switch node. All we've done there is done one check and automatically routed it to the approved node. This saves time and makes your workflows much, much cleaner. Trust me. So the next helpful tip I wish someone had told me was the ability to have a human in the loop. So when we're building workflows and we have requests or we need approvals, n8n has the ability to send messages and wait for a response. So you'll see in this workflow, what I'm doing is I'm building an approval request and then I'm going to send a message to Slack and then wait for a human to either approve the order or reject the order. The reason why this is important is on the next section, we've got a check. So if the order is approved, we'll go ahead down the true branch and execute an approved confirmation and set the status to approved. If the order hasn't been approved, then we'll go down the false branch and we'll send a rejected notice as well as set the status to rejected. The next tip that I wish somebody had told me was to use subflows. So rather than having multiple workflows with the same logic throughout, we can just create one subflow that contains the logic and just reference it in multiple different n8n workflows. So why? Let's stop copying logic and convert repeatable nodes into working subflows. So in this subflow, you can see I've got a send Slack alert that normalizes inputs and adds emojis based upon severity. It then posts it to Slack and returns a compact layout to the parent. So rather than having this logic copied throughout multiple n8n workflows, I just create one subflow and then in my parent flow, I can just reference it once. So you'll see here, I'll go ahead and execute And you'll see here that my subflow has been successfully executed. The next tip that I wish somebody had taught me was to name my nodes correctly. So you'll see in this example two identical workflows. The top one, which is vague and default, we have three different nodes which says set1, HTTP request to merge one. Now, if you ever step away from this node for a couple days or even weeks, and you try to come back and understand what each of the different nodes is doing, it's not easy to understand, or even if you pass it to a team member, they're going to have no idea as well. So directly under that, we can see that I've got the exact same workflow. The first node is called update invoice in Google Sheets. The second node is notify the customer via Slack DM. And the third node is to archive the PDF in our Google Drive successfully. How much of a difference does that make? So pro tip, don't be lazy. You can easily just right click and click on rename. Give each of your nodes proper names. The next tip that I wish somebody had told me when I first got started was to use the import curl function. So because you're working with n8n, you're going to be working with APIs a lot of the time. And usually all of the documentation will tell you all of the required parameters, authentication, everything else that is needed to integrate with the system. So rather than configuring a HTTP node one step at a time, there's a much easier way. In this example, you can see I've got a curl command. It's got the URL and it's got two header parameters. So rather than configuring that one at a time, I can add a HTTP request node, and then I can click on the import curl button there and paste my curl command. You'll see instantly that the HTTP request node has been configured for you. This is a massive time saver and stops you from making silly mistakes. The last tip that I wish somebody had taught me when I was first getting started with n8n workflows is to use the set command in order to set all your variables for the workflow. Now this is particularly useful if you're using the self-hosted version, as you don't have access to the variables option. So for all my self-hosters, this one's for you. What you can do at the beginning of your workflow is to set all of your settings. So in this example, I've set timeout, retry limit, stop on errors, the environment, and the workflow owners. This is particularly useful if you want to control all of the settings in one place for your workflows. It's much better to do this so that you don't have to click on many different nodes to find out what you're looking for. So I hope you found this video useful. And if you want this free template, make sure to join up to my automation vault. The link's in the description below. And as always, don't forget to subscribe for more n8n tutorials. See you in the next one.